I take a lot of photos. Sometimes they're snapshots. Sometimes I ask people to come to my studio or my home or their places. I post for me and I take photos. So I see them, some of the photos I see them as a reference, and then I work on a lot of drawings. But then when I start painting, I want to get as far away as I could from the photographs. I think I want to use unrealistic colors that are, because I don't want to represent reality, because then that's too close to photograph. But at the same time, I really want to have colors that relate to very specific emotions. I usually cover my painting a lot. I paint over all the time because, as Joseph Albert said, that all the colors are in relation to each other. So different, like the same red will look very different if the background is gray or black. So I move everything until a moment that I feel that they work together. But for the figures, I think I have a few tones for the figure. There are purple figures, pink figures, and also there are yellow figures. I think that's kind of how I imagine their personality would coordinate with different tones.
You have a very peculiar use of color in a way. So you work very much with contrasts, but you work also very much with nuances, like for this painting, for instance, which is kind of dark, but of course a lot of colors come out when you take a closer look, but from afar it looks really like a dark black painting.
When I lived in the US, I remember I went to see at Reinhardt exhibition, and it was an exhibition of very, very dark paintings. You saw they're all black, but when you get close, you see the shapes, and you see different shades of dark blue and black. And I think that experience really reminds me of when you are in a very dark room, when you walk in a very dark room, that you don't see anything in the beginning, but then when your eyes get used to it, you start to see the objects in the room and see and even see light. So I think for these paintings, I want to have very low contrast, but have moments of fire and light.
You were saying that you use with different colors as layers also, and sometimes you start with a color that is totally vibrant, maybe to also work against it, and some you wash away, some you keep. And what I really like about your works, in a way that's just a detail, is that on the side sometimes you see different color combination that you would not expect in the finished painting, right? Sometimes you have an acidly green, although the painting is rather grayish. And this is also a painting where you can clearly see what is kind of underneath or was underneath.
For the color, I think when I start a painting, I think that's the most exciting time for me, and it's also the most, I think I felt the most optimistic that I have an idea and it's gonna be great. I'm gonna use very crazy, very saturated colors, that anything is possible. So I want to start with very loose plans. So sometimes I use color, I know that they will not stay, but just to tell myself that it's possible to just lay it out there. And also for oil paints, that even having a color you don't show underneath. For example, purple is a really great color. It's for me, it's very mysterious and very artificial. But so I sometimes have a very purple, violet background, and then paint it over with gray, and then the purple still shows a little bit. So I have a very sophisticated gray that shows maybe even a tiny bit of the purple. And I like this kind of layering. And then, as I said, that I changed my color a lot. But I like the texture and the memories from the paints beneath.
You often leave your backgrounds quite vague, right?
Yes.
Most of the time you just have some kind of monochrome color, but it's structured instinctively, so that it's, you see paintbrush, or that it's more really, no, there's only space is, there's only the horizontal line that you think about space, and it's also like this work where you don't really know. Of course, he's laying on some kind of cushions, but there is nothing that can hold him like a sofa or something. So he's just laying there. So it's a very, very, you treat space very, very vaguely. It becomes more really like a background, right?
Yes, I think before I made many paintings, they are more like close-ups, and I think this year the paintings, the compositions kind of changed a bit. I think I have big open spaces as a background.
So this is one of the earliest works in the show from 2013 called Bathtub, and when we talk about color, this looks really like an exploration of the color red, because you have totally different shapes of red that you put in contrast to each other, and some you have great contrast, but some, especially from afar, you don't really can decide where which parts ends. How would you describe this period in your artistic practice?
Especially for this painting, I wanted to make a pink painting. I wanted to use magenta. So, and I think I was imagining if this pink, if there is blue in this painting, but then in the form of pink, what kind of blue that would be. So everything kind of translates in this way. And at that period, I was really attracted to pastel colors. So this, in this painting also, I wanted to only make a painting, but having a little bit of mint green as the contrast to the pink. I paint people I know that they are my friends, and they are very, I think these people, I think I'm really specific with the people I paint. I think I love people who are beautiful and special. And I think I see them as characters in my work, that I place them in different situations.
How do you come up to the ideas of your situation? For instance, if you have a horse with a special hat, and then you have a half-naked man, he looks quite perplexed next to the horse. So what is the basic idea to start with a situation? How do you conceive a situation?
For this painting, actually, I was in Rome in 2013 in the spring for a visit, and then I was on the square, and I saw this horse wearing a red hat, and then his ears got covered. Well, even the ears are covered, but you can still see it like turning around like this, and I thought that was really funny. And then one moment that an older artist I know, Enzo Cookie, just passed by from the horse, and I was really astonished by this moment, but I was also feeling too shy to say hi to it, so this really stuck in my head. But I made this painting 1 year later, this year in lockdown in Paris. I think I really wanted to paint a horse because it's an animal that Enzo also talks about. He said that a horse is the only animal that could sacrifice for humans, that if he needs to run, and then he will run until his heart explodes. Oh, wow. So I think these are very loaded information.
It's a very loaded image, yes.
Yes. So, but then they have this clear and the soft eyes when they look at you. They just have so much tenderness that I wanted to make a horse. He looks really soft and tenderness and really empathetic, meanwhile wearing a kind of ridiculous hat. And then the guy might be, I was imagining this could be the owner of the horse, but I want him to look kind of clueless.
And what has also changed compared to older works is you used to paint a lot of naked figures. Most of them were men, but right now you also worked with clothes or with accessories, for instance, like the red bonnet coming back here in this work, as it was on the horse painting, and we have pictures of women also with some scarf in her hair. So we have another work here that you focus on a woman taking on a black glove, so there's also accessory coming in.
I think before I make everybody naked I think I still like to paint flash, and I like to paint them having a lot of volume, but then I think this year I feel like I cannot make everybody naked again. It's a bit too much. But then I also felt like how we dress, like the decision we make with the clothes also says so much about who we are. And also they are very effective props for the painting, I think. It can give a lot more information